next thing you know, he's hitting me with a closed fist and slapping me and shoving me into the wall and grabbing me by my hair, dragging me through the house. That was the beginning of 18 and a half years of being in a torturous marriage. And he always told me, if you ever try to leave me, I'll find you and I'll kill you.
So you're living in fear staying, and you're living in fear about leaving because he'll find you and the kids.
There were many days where I thought my kids are going to get off the bus one day. They're going to come into the house and they're going to find me dead. And of course, then they would find their dad dead, because he always said, if I kill you, I'm killing myself. I'm never going to prison. I wasn't his target that day. That day it was our 17-year-old son. And I felt this feeling like somebody was going to die.
Today, I have one of our greatest guests. Now, Sandee Jo is someone that she cares about other people. She cares so deeply. And in listening to her story, she's shared that story with all of us through If Walls Could Talk. As you read this book, you're going to truly understand what someone goes through and why they change. Only change isn't that easy while it's happening. Sometimes we get caught into this whirlwind that we think we're doing the very best that we can. And after we step out of it, we realize what a whirlwind it was. I'm going to start by reading How Could I Have Let This Happen? This was the torturous question circling through Sandee Jo's mind as flashing red and blue lights cast eerie images against the backdrop of trees surrounding her home in rural Tennessee. In disbelief, she watched as a police officer placed his hand on the top of her 17-year-old son's head to guide him into the back seat of a patrol car. For years, Sandee Jo had lived on Someday Isle. Someday she would escape her abusive husband, Tommy. Someday her children would be safe. Someday she would live free from fear. But now her worst fears had come true. Her husband, Tommy, lay dead from a gunshot wound to the head. He would terrorize his family no longer, but their safety had come at an unimaginable price. Sandee Jo watched as the police cruiser drove away into the night, her gentle firstborn son's face expressionless through the window. Sandee Jo, as I welcome you here today, I just want our listeners to know that where you were and where you are now, you have definitely become more. Yet I want to take you back to the days when all of this started, before this evening that I spoke about. I want to take you back to when you were growing up. What was your family life like? And how did you meet your husband?
So growing up, I grew up in Tampa, which is a bustling city in Florida. I had a happy childhood as far as I knew. We didn't, have tons, and it definitely wasn't idyllic, but I knew I was loved. I had a close family. My parents were divorced, but I saw my dad on the weekends, and I was with my mom during the week, my mom and my brother, and life seemed great. So then I met my husband, I started dating when I was 16. I started dating him, and I met him through my grandmother, who was attending his dad's church. So, of course, you think if your grandma makes the introduction, then what could be wrong with that? He came from a very wonderful family. And so we began dating. We dated for 2 years. And he was a perfect gentleman. He was always just polite. My family loved him, and I loved his family. It just seemed like the next right step to do was get married. And so after 2 years of dating, when I was 18 and he was 19, we got married.
And did things change after you got married, or did it go great for a while?
We had a wonderful honeymoon for about 4 or 5 days. The day we returned from our honeymoon was the first time I had ever seen him become aggressive with me. I never saw him raise his voice, much less raise his hand to me. And then the day we were home from our honeymoon, unloading the truck, he shoved me to the floor, started screaming in my face, and this was something completely shocking to me. So, of course, I was surprised by his behavior, and then immediately he turned on a dime and started crying and saying, I'm so sorry, I'll never do that again. I don't know what happened, and that was the beginning of 18 and a half years of being in a torturous marriage. Of course, that day I was blindsided and I had no idea that he had this any way, shape, or form, this ability to be like he was toward me. He had never displayed that before. So of course I said, well, I forgive you. And he just said, I'm just, it was a long drive, and we had been in North Carolina, and he says, I'm just a little stressed out. And whatever it was that he said, I just forgave him. But then it was just day after day after that, it became a little bit more and a little bit more. And next thing you know, he's hitting me with a closed fist and slapping me and shoving me into the wall and grabbing me by my hair, dragging me through the house. And then there were weapons involved, like guns and knives to my throat. He would shoot guns, he wouldn't shoot me, obviously. He would shoot at me. He would shoot near me. And then he would tell me, if I wanted to hit you, I would. I missed on purpose. And he would trap me in speeding vehicles, me and the kids. And he would drive over 100 miles an hour while we were just basically helpless. And then he would also kill family pets to maintain his control. So if we did something that upset him or made him mad, he would kill a family pet for punishment, to teach us a lesson. And this was his pattern over the years. And he always told me, if you ever try to leave me, I'll find you and I'll kill you. And I believed him because I knew what he was capable of.
So you're living in fear staying, and you're living in fear about leaving because he'll find you and the kids. Now, he was always someone that seemed to want to teach a lesson, much like when Bubba, who was also Tommy, you called him Bubba, he was out and he kept getting in poison ivy. What did your husband do then?
Yeah, so he was about 9 years old, I believe. And he loved to be outside, very outdoorsy kind of a little boy. And he always got into poison ivy. And his dad told him many times, stay away from this weed. This is going to, make you get the rash again. And so this one particular time he came back inside, and sure enough, he had gotten into poison ivy. So I went to go get the calamine lotion, but my husband was, he was adamant. No, he's not getting calamine lotion this time. He's going to get what I give him. And he put this very old antiseptic type purple dye on him. And as soon as he put it on, just the skin, his white skin turned purple. He put it on his hands. He put it on his neck. He put it on his face. He put it on his arms and all the places that the poison ivy had affected him. And he says, this will teach him a lesson. And he was literally the color purple for, I want to say at least 2 weeks, maybe a little under, but it didn't wash off very easily. And that was his punishment for that. He wouldn't let him go outside. He couldn't go, they were homeschooled at the time. So he was pretty much trapped inside, except for the day that I was putting hanging clothes on the line outside, and he snuck out, and he kind of just went into this monologue about fairness and equality, and bless his little heart, he was trapped inside, and his face was purple, his hands were purple, and I believe he was feeling the weight of that.
Yeah, and he said something that was very profound. And all of this pain, he said to you, we shouldn't judge people by the way they look on the outside, because there's something more on the inside. Was he talking about himself, do you believe, or was he also talking about his dad?
No, I can't. I don't know what his little mind was thinking at the time. I just know that it penetrated my heart as a mom. And I remember looking into his little eyes and hearing his heart, the words that this little 9-year-old boy is speaking about. It's not what we look like on the outside, is it, Mommy? It's what we look like on the inside. And I just knew that he was, I think, making himself feel better and possibly realizing that his family does display on the outside something that looks different than what we are on behind closed doors. So it's very possible that he was making that connection at such a young age. He saw so much for a 9-year-old kid. And so it's very possible he was making that connection.
So you always had to look good on the outside, and you never told anybody about any of this. You kept everything inside. Why do you think you were doing that?
There were a few reasons. I know that in the beginning, I didn't want to ruin the family image. I didn't want to ruin we were in church, and my father-in-law was the pastor, and I loved my father-in-law very much, and I still do to this day. I'm very, very wonderful, godly man. So I didn't want to make waves within the church, but I also had the constant threat of him telling me that, if you ever tell anybody, nobody will believe you anyhow because of the mess that you came from. He referred to my family a lot because we had many divorces in our family and he had no divorces in his. So he would constantly tell me that I brought the baggage into our marriage and this was all my fault. Whenever we would have arguments and fights, he would say, this is because of you. My family's not like this. So I actually started to believe that after time. And so I didn't think that by going to his family or by going to anybody in the church that they would believe me because I felt like what he said was that it was my fault somehow or another. I just began believing that. So I had to put this show on, and he was doing it as well. He was the youth pastor for many years. So he was putting on a show because sometimes we would just get to the car and be driving away from the church and he would start raging in the car, where 10 to 15 minutes before that, he was preaching to a bunch of middle school kids in our youth group.
So you kept all of this inside. Only one time you embarrassed him in front of his children. What happened?
He never liked me to ever speak against anything he said, even if it was a ridiculous outburst. If I said anything that went against what he said or did, then he really got upset. He would be upset to begin with, but then he would get enraged. So this one particular day I said something and he came, I believe this was the part where he came into the back room and he put a gun to my throat. And I never knew if these guns were loaded or because many of the guns he kept around the house were loaded. But I never knew if the ones that he put to my head or to my body were loaded at the time. So he slowly put it up underneath my jaw. And he said, very calmly, very controlled. He seemed very controlled in his behavior that day. And he said, if you ever embarrass me in front of my children. But he did that often. That wasn't just an isolated incident. He would do it with knives. He would do it with with guns. He did not like to be embarrassed in front of anyone, whether it was his kids, whether, if we were in church and the kids got too loud, he would he did not want to be embarrassed. He didn't want anybody to look at his family in a negative way.
Yeah. So you had to be the picture perfect family at all times.
I feel like I felt like at the time that was my job, was to make us look like we were the perfect family. Walking into church on Sunday mornings, walking into church on Sunday evenings, Wednesday evenings. We also drove the bus for the bus route. So we were very involved. And all the while, as soon as we got home, it was a different life behind closed doors.
So we really cannot tell what's happening with anyone. Each and every person has a story. Yet a lot of women and men, because it's on both sides here, people are abused, both men and women, verbally, mostly men, physically, mostly women. What happens in your mind to where you don't dare say anything to anybody? And what would you say to the women that are listening to this that are doing exactly what you did, putting up with the abuse?
Well, I think what happens I can speak for myself. I can't speak for every woman, but I have an idea. They're in similar circumstances with their thought process. But I know for me, I was 18. I had just turned 18 a week before we were married. So I was very young and had not lived life long enough to, really understand it much. And I went from my mom's house to my husband's house. So there was, that I had no other life. So everything he told me, I thought was gold. I thought it was true. I thought it was factual. And, coming from the family that he did, being raised in the church like he had been, I just assumed that he was right, even though it felt really bad. And I knew that his behavior and him hitting me and him doing these terrible things, I knew that wasn't right. But somehow in my mind, I justified it. I just thought, well, I mean, he comes from a good family. I know he was raised the right way. So I guess in my mind, I just kept justifying it and thinking, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. I would pray often. What I would tell to other women, and what I do tell to other women when I have the opportunity to speak to them, first of all, you're not alone, because for so many years, I thought this was just my problem. I didn't realize that there were other women, other wives, other moms out there suffering like I was. I just naively thought that I was the only one in the situation. So I would always like to tell them they're not alone. And then I also want to encourage them to tell someone, whether that's a close friend, whether that's a close family member, but somebody that you can tell and you can trust with that, because I feel like to keep the secret, it's this deep, dark secret that we just feel like we have to keep to protect, or to keep, what we think we're protecting our family. And it actually just perpetuates the control. So they know, like, for instance, I feel like he knew I wasn't going to tell because of all the threats, because of all the, outbursts. So that was just control in itself, me not telling. And then thirdly, you have to separate yourself from your abuser. If I had it to do all over again, I would literally risk it all, grab my kids and get out. I would pray, and I would take my kids and leave, because it's living in fear day after day after day is no way to live. God doesn't want us to live that way. But I did that for so many years. And there were many days where I thought my kids are going to get off the bus one day. They're going to come into the house and they're going to find me dead. And of course, then they would find their dad dead, because he always said, if I kill you, I'm killing myself. I'm never going to prison. So that was his constant threat. So I just figured one day that's what was going to happen. And that's no way to live. But that is exactly how I lived. And on the good days, I prayed for good days. I prayed for change. The good days would come where there wasn't the yelling, there wasn't the pushing or the violence. But it was like we were walking on eggshells, because we wondered, when is he gonna explode again? And it didn't have to be anything. It could just be something so small that would get him enraged, whether you woke him up from a nap, or something so simple could just cause him to go off on these tirades. And so it wasn't as if, we were a family of 4 kids and 2 adults. I mean, things happen throughout the day. So it's just no way to live, living in fear of what's next, what's going to happen. And there's no perfect answer. There's no perfect solution to domestic violence. I mean, even when you get the kids and you get out, you still have to, unfortunately, there's still the whole, you have to share this, right to, he still has the right to see his kids unless he's done something that the courts can prove otherwise. And that's the other thing. I always thought, well, I'll never be able to prove it. It's just my word against his. I didn't think any deeper than that. I just always thought that he'll deny it, and, then I'll be stuck with him, and then he'll really be upset, because now I've tried to get help. But I also didn't know that places like Safe Space existed. Safe Space is an organization that I am on the board of directors with here in my community. And there are so many other domestic violence shelters out there. And I did not know that these places existed. So with that option in mind, who knows what I would have done had I known. I didn't know, so that never happened. But I do encourage women to safely try to get to separate from their abuser. And there are ways that you can do it that are safer than others, which is get law enforcement involved and also get these centers involved that can help you with a safety plan.
So did your kids ever beg you to leave?
I don't recall them ever saying, Mom, we have to go or anything like that. What usually happened after his fits, we all jumped into recovery mode. It was like we knew what to do. He would usually, rage and throw stuff and tear the house up and hit us. And then afterwards, he was very cheerful and apologetic. And a lot of times he'd go to his room and lay down, and we just jumped into recovery mode, and we all started like picking up the broken pictures and cleaning up the glass and whatever it was that we needed to do. That's what we did. And that was even when they were at school and they weren't at home. And this would happen. I tried to get it cleaned up before the kids came home because I didn't want them to see yet another fight that happened while they were at school. I just always tried to keep it looking like, we were happy.
So I'm just curious, did he ever go to counseling or do anything to help his rage or anger?
We went to one counseling session together with his family in the beginning of our marriage. That's because his father, he had, I guess, shared with his dad that we would argue a lot, but I don't think he told his dad much more than that. So we did do one counseling session. And then he did go to a doctor who diagnosed him with bipolar and put him on medication. As far as counseling, there wasn't really counseling involved. It was just when he went to the doctor, he had to, go to his follow-ups, and the doctor would ask him a series of questions and he would answer them. But that's the closest thing to therapy that he would go to.
What happened that evening? Because it came to such a boiling point. Nobody does something like Bubba did just because. Yeah. It had to get to a point of there was no other way out.
Well, that day, he started drinking very early that day. So he was drinking and mixing the liquor with his bipolar medications. And so for 2 years, he had been drinking heavily at that point. He woke up, started drinking. He called the boys out to do a project. So they were working on a project outside. And I wasn't there, but from what Bubba says, he cut a board wrong. And when he cut this board wrong, his dad became enraged and started yelling at him and threw a piece of equipment at him, a tool, and then started chasing him. And from that moment, that would have been in the mid-morning sometime until the afternoon, we were pretty much just all day long, on and off, in this chase, standoff, struggle. And I kept yelling first. And by this time, it was outside in our yard. We lived out in the country on 22 acres. So there's nobody there to hear or, to come help us. So I'm screaming, he's screaming. I'm telling Bubba to run. I'm just saying run because his dad was basically threatening him, saying, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to split your head like a melon. And he had a pickaxe and he was chasing him with that. And I was trying to get between the two of them. And this went on I lost track of time, but this just kept going on. And he would holler back to his dad, why are you doing this? Dad, what's wrong with you? Why are you trying to hurt me? And every time I tried to separate the two, he would throw me off of him. I wasn't his target that day. Many days I was his target, but that day it was our 17-year-old son. He did finally run and he got away for a little while and things seemed to be calming down. At least that's what I had hoped and prayed for. At that point, I was just trying to keep him in the bedroom. Tommy had gone to lay down. That was what I was hoping for because usually that's what he would do. He would get upset. He would rage and then he would be wore out because he was also drunk. So I had hoped that he would go in there and fall asleep. But he wasn't asleep. He kept hollering down the hall because he wanted to maintain that control. So he kept hollering down the hall, I'm not asleep. I'm listening. I'm listening for his footsteps. When he comes back, he's dead. And he kept hollering this down the hall. And sure enough, Bubba returns home. And that's where, from that point on, everything just kind of spirals. It was a heavy day. It was a day like no other, obviously. I knew in my spirit, as violent as he had been all through the years, I knew this day was different. I knew it was a darker day than any other day we'd experienced. And I felt this feeling of impending doom, like somebody was going to die. And I just knew in my heart that it would be over my dead body if any of our kids died at his hands. And so I knew I was going to do whatever I had to do. And
So what was harder, taking the abuse from your husband or watching your son be put into the police car, not knowing what would happen to him?
so much harder to watch your child affected by the abuse. I often say that Bubba had to react. Bubba had to take action because I didn't take action. And I know that many people say, well, Sandee Jo, this is not your fault. You didn't ask for this. And I understand that. And it is true. I just feel like had I taken action sooner to get my kids out of this terrible situation, this terrible dysfunction, we don't know what could have been different. And I don't know if we would have gotten away with our lives because, like I said, he had threatened, I'll find you, I'll kill the kids, I'll kill myself, I'm not going to prison. This was a very real threat. There's also that in the back of my mind. I don't know what would have happened, but I do know that my lack of action caused my 17-year-old son to take action. It forced him. He had no choice. We had gotten to a place where his temper and his violence, he was a dangerous man, and he was only becoming worse with drinking and mixing these medications, and just it was only getting worse. It was only a matter of time.
So how long was your son away from you as you wondered what would happen with him?
I think altogether it was almost 2 months where we didn't know what his future would look like. 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. I can't remember exactly, but where we just didn't know what would happen as a result of what he did to protect us.
So your son is in jail for 6 to 8 weeks, and you don't know if he's going on to the penitentiary. You don't know how they're going to charge him. What was the deciding factor, do you believe, in the judge's eyes or the police that helped determine that Bubba should be let go, that it was in self-defense?
Well, I know it was a lot of prayer. I feel certain that it was a lot of prayer. I also know that they went to the house and they did a complete investigation. They looked the house over. They found all the pieces of tools, just like I reported that night at the police station, all the tools that he had been throwing at Bubba that day. The holes in the wall from the bullet holes that were in our wall. They found so many guns throughout the house. They found blood on the walls from various fights before, pictures of busted doorknobs and busted door frames, windows that were boarded up because every time we would have a fight and he would get mad and throw something out of the window, he just boarded that window up. He didn't try to fix it. He just boarded it up. So there was enough compelling evidence for them to realize that this kid is not the problem.
Were you able to visit your son during that time?
Not when he was in the detention center, where they took him immediately. And because he was 17, that's where, they take you if you're under 18. But when he did move to a different facility, which was in Chattanooga, I was able to go once a week for, I believe, 30 minutes. And it was over 3-hour drive. So I would go, my father-in-law drove me, and we would share that time to, seeing Bubba and talking with him. And mainly he wanted to know how I was doing. How are the kids? It's just, he was always thinking about our life at home. And we talked about.
When did Bubba actually become the man of the house that was the protector?
Well, he started helping. He changed my car, the family car. He changed the brakes at, I believe he was 10 years old when he did that for the first time. His dad told him, "Go change the brakes on your mom's car. You've seen me do it before. Go out there and, make sure you do it right. This is the family vehicle. This is your mom's car." So I can remember he was 10, maybe 11. Maybe he was 11, but very young. So in that respect, he had to be the man of the house to do that. But as far as defending and standing up and trying to protect me, I think that he was wise enough to know that if he did stand up to his dad, it was going to be a big blowout. So, and I would obviously I wouldn't have wanted him to. If we were in a fight or an argument, I always tried to shoo the kids off, go to your rooms, go. I didn't want them to be part of it. But, as he got older, as each one of the kids began getting older, they were seeing stuff, and they were obviously they're starting to put things together. Like, this isn't normal. Why is dad doing this? Why is dad treating mom like this? This isn't what's supposed to happen in families. So I think he just got to a point where he's 17 years old. He's been seeing it for years, and he was just tired of it. And the day that it happened, he was actually the target of his dad's abuse.
Did the kids ever say anything to anybody at school, maybe their teachers or other parents of their friends?
As far as I know, they didn't. They were afraid. He had such control over us as far as our thinking, as far as what we said, what we told people, and it really, he maintained that control. We knew we couldn't tell anyone. We knew that if we did, we would pay a huge price for that.
Well, and the reason we're bringing all of this up and going deep into this is the fact that you are now taking a stand for women in a way that I just love what you're doing. And I want you to give us that hotline number in case anyone is listening to this and they need to call that number now to get help. Don't wait, because you never know how it's going to turn out. What is that number, Sandee Jo?
So that's the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and it's 800-799-7233. And if you call that number, they don't have to be in your area. They can connect you with a shelter near you. And when you do make that call, a lot of women, a lot of people think that, oh my goodness, if I make that call, then they're going to send officers to my house, red lights and sirens, and this is, going to make it worse. I know that because I was afraid to call the police. I was afraid of what would happen. But actually, that's not what they do. These shelters are trained, and they know what they need to do to keep the victim and the family safe. So in this new age of modern technology, there are so many different ways that they can help you. They can help you with a safety plan. They can help if that's all you need. Some people are not in the drastic violent situation that me and my kids were in. Some women are in a controlled environment, verbally controlled, or they're financially controlled, where they have complete dependence because they have no ability to make money or to even if they are working, they don't see their paycheck. And that was also in my case. I would work all week and he would take the money, but they are able to help you with a safety plan, with a plan. And they're also there to listen so that you can realize I'm not alone. There are people who can help me keep me and my kids safer than we are right now.
It's interesting because the people that are the abusers, I find, generally blame the other partner. Like he blamed you, saying it was all your fault that this was happening, and you started to believe it, wanting to get better, wanting to improve, looking in the mirror, constantly taking responsibility, yet he never took any responsibility. And I find that over and over again, that the people that are the true victims are the ones that end up taking all the responsibility because the abuser says it's all their fault and has them thoroughly convinced that it is. So I want to change gears just a little bit because this is about becoming more. And I've got to say, you have truly become more. Yet you've gone through a lot of pain, not just with your husband, pain after the fact of losing your husband, watching your child go through what he did. How long did it take before you actually looked in the mirror and said, Sandee Jo, you're a fabulous lady?
That did not happen overnight. When you hear things, negative things about yourself year after year, day after day, year after year, you begin to believe those. And it didn't matter that my mom always told me how much potential I had and how wonderful I was and how beautiful of none of that mattered. When he began telling me these things constantly, I just began to absorb these lies. And so now he's gone. Me and the kids are free from the abuse, but we're still living with the effects of it. We're still living with the pain and the scars, because just because the abuse stops doesn't mean that you don't still have these night terrors. You still don't have the confidence that, you should have, because you didn't do anything wrong. It took me a while, a lot of prayer. And I'm just so thankful that, like the song says, what a friend we have in Jesus. And I feel like he was my best counselor over the years. And then, of course, my wonderful now husband, James Crocker, he just breathed so much life into me and would tell me constantly, you have a story inside you. You need to share that story. You could help so many people with your story. But I would always, again, this just goes back to lack of confidence. He just continued to tell me. And then so many other people as well. And if I even leaked out a little bit of my story, because I didn't tell it too often, I was too afraid. I didn't want to relive those memories. But on the occasion when I did, they would look at me and say, I can't believe that. You really need to write a book. You need to tell your story. So over the years, just hearing this constantly from other people, I began to think, okay, maybe this is true. Maybe I'm sitting here trying to stuff all this pain deep down inside of me, move forward and forget it. But that's not what God wants. God wants me to use my pain to help, even if that takes me back into a dark place for a little while. I'm living a happy life now. My kids are safe. My kids are happy. And I should use what I can, even if it was painful, I should use that to help as many people as I can possibly help, because I know that women are still in these situations, and that breaks my heart.
Well, you're taking that darkness and bringing light to other people and bringing them hope because of the things that are available to us that you never knew about and you couldn't speak about or even find out about because you were afraid to tell anybody. And you probably made up story after story about why you had the bruises or how things were happening, how you got cut. Pretty good storyteller at one point, right?
Unfortunately, you learn to make up stories. And I can remember it was about a year after he was gone, I was, a single mom with my kids. And I remember thinking about saying something that wasn't a completely whole truth. I wasn't brought up lying. I mean, I didn't make I can't remember just being this little kid that lied a lot. It wasn't that, but I can remember being out of my abusive situation. And I was driving in my car, and I remember thinking, well, I'll just say this or something. And I remember God speaking clearly to me that day and saying, those days are over. You don't make up any more stories. Those days are gone. And from that day forward, I have tried to walk in as much transparency as possible, because I know for years I felt I had to fabricate these, sensational stories to explain why I have a black eye, why I have this terrible bruise on my arm or on my leg. I became very creative, unfortunately. But I remember God putting his finger on that place in my life and saying, no more. Those days are gone. So I just moved forward in knowing that God loves me. God protected me for so many years, and there was a reason for it. And I have to be a voice for the women who are still in those situations who do not have a voice, just like I thought I didn't have a voice.
I think we do go through things, Sandee Jo, to help other people. And it's very interesting when you're in an abusive relationship, physical abuse can be seen more than the verbal abuse, yet you were obtaining both as well as your children. And you were sticking up for him, probably telling the kids, oh, your father really loves you. Oh, he's wonderful. Oh, let's, honor him because he's your father. And yet deep down in, was there ever a time that you just thought, could he just shut up for a minute?
Absolutely. I can remember feeling like I had no more love for him. For years, I had love and I had hope that he was going to change. And then after about 10 or 11 years of living this life, I just remember thinking, I don't feel like I love him anymore. But I still went through all the motions. And I still, like you said, honored him on his birthday, on Father's Day. The kids always, we always made sure that we had something for him, a party, or because I was just at that point going through the motions. I don't feel like I had love in my heart for him because he had done so much to the family. And especially when he does these terrible things to our children. And at some point, you just detach emotionally. And so, yes, I was still being a wife to him. I was still doing what I felt like I had to do. Again, I was also in the church, deeply rooted in the church. So I thought that if I ever dared to try to leave him, God would be so upset with me. I can't divorce him. This is the preaching that I heard from the pulpit. But beyond that, I was afraid. I was afraid to leave him. So, but as far as the love, I feel like the love had just, it was gone. It was just me trying to struggle to stay afloat with the kids. And I guess love at that point would have been a luxury, but it was gone. I had used it. I still prayed for him. Because I wanted to see him change, because I held on to the young man that I dated. I held on to that. And I knew that the young man that I dated, the guy that I met when I was 16 or just almost 16, was such a wonderful person. And I just kept thinking, he's going to be that same person again one day. One day he's going to be the Tommy that I met and married. And I hung on to that for so long. And then at some point, I just detached myself from
And
him.
now, though, you have your husband who is wonderful. And so by hanging on to that, you do have a wonderful man in your life. And I'm so excited that you did share with us this book. I mean, if walls could talk, ladies, if you're in a relationship like this, men, if you're in an abusive relationship, listen to what Sandee Jo says. Are they willing to change? Because as the book Becoming More says, you can't get to better until you get to different. What are they willing to do different? Are they willing to go to counseling? Are they willing to change something in their life? Because Sandee Jo, you've helped us so much, one with your faith, and you trusted God to get you out of that, and he found a way to get you out. He's also found a way to have a wonderful family now, enjoying your children, the husband that you've chosen to marry, one that absolutely supports you. One more time, Sandee, that maybe we can help someone here.
That's the National Domestic Violence Hotline. 1-800-799-7233.
Yeah. The statistics show us that there are many people out there that live this way day in and day out. And that's why I chose, Sandee Jo, to interview you, because you're such an advocate for women and you're such an advocate to help them. All those that need help, please seek it. For your children's sake and for your own sake. Sandee Jo, thank you so much. Is there anything, I know you like to end with saying that, what's something that you would tell every woman out there, maybe 3 things that you just wanted to say that I failed to ask you?
Well, that's the same thing that I said earlier. You're not alone. There are other people going through the same thing you're going through. You're not alone. Tell somebody that you trust. Get the secret, unload that secret, and then separate yourself from your abuser. But do it as safe as possible, which is to get other people involved, like the domestic violence hotline and the safe space shelters in your area.
Sandee Jo, we are so excited that you were with us today. Thank you for sharing. And I'm sorry that we had to bring up the dark memories, yet that's how we shed light to other people. Also, we're so excited that your entire life has become more, that you're now living a wonderful life that you so deserve. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for taking an opportunity to shed light on this underreported, underrecognized problem that we actually have that's so prevalent. So thank you.
And for those of you who desire to become more, be certain to subscribe to Becoming More podcast, where we learn through other people what we can do to become more.